Kickstarter raised over $4,000 for my friends to lovers sweet romance. And even though it raised over $4,000, if you've seen my previous videos, you know that the profit margin ended up being pretty small. Today we're going to answer the question as to whether running a Kickstarter for special editions of my book was worth it. Put you back there. We'll be reviewing a ton of information today, going behind the scenes with all the Kickstarter info. We'll be going over funding stats. We'll be going over survey results. I'll be discussing how many of the people backed the project because of me and being a fan of me versus having never heard of me before. We're also going to discuss what I would do differently if I decide to do a Kickstarter again. And would I do a Kickstarter again? So if that sounds good to you, make sure to stay tuned. Hello everyone, my name is Mandy. I'm an author, the creator of the book launch series, and I also have courses on book cover design and book formatting. I make weekly videos on the business of being an author, so if that sounds good to you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you never miss a new upload. You can also join as a YouTube member to get early access to videos as well as behind the scenes content. So a couple things. First things first is that this video is a part of a series of videos that I've done on Kickstarter. This is kind of the video to wrap everything up more or less. I have one other video planned to do a review on Book Vault, but that's coming later. But if you want a video on how much I spent versus how much I made in terms of profit for my Kickstarter, a video where I fulfill my Kickstarter, a video where I show how I designed the special editions of the book and printed special editions of the book, that is all in a separate Kickstarter playlist. It'll be linked down below so you can watch that. I also wanted to make the announcement that these special edition paperbacks in the annotated deluxe hardcovers that I created for the Kickstarter are now available to the public on my website. These were not Kickstarter exclusives. The point of the Kickstarter was to fund the printing of these books so I could sell them long term. So if you missed out on the Kickstarter and wanted to get a special edition paperback or the annotated deluxe hardcover, you can do so on my website right now. I will say the annotated deluxe hardcover might be a limited print run. I haven't decided if I'm going to print it again, so it's possible that once it sells out for good. So if you want an annotated deluxe hardcover, make sure to snag it while you can. Okay, with that said, let's jump into the meat of the video. And first things first, we're gonna go over all the stat info I have. And the first thing we'll be discussing is the project follower stats. Now, I want to discuss how many followers my project had because how many followers a project have definitely helps you predict how successful the campaign is going to be. For that reason, most people recommend that you do not launch your Kickstarter project until it has reached 100 followers. Now, I did not follow that rule and I launched my project with only 63 followers because I had a deadline that I was going to meet and I was going to do it no matter what, and I just dealt with the consequences. And I think for how little followers I had, it garnered a pretty good result. Now by the end of campaign, I had a 98 followers, which is much closer to the 100 followers that you're supposed to have before you launch your campaign, but it was still something. Now, out of those 98 followers, 33 of them converted to actual sales. So that means out of the 98 people, only 33 of them actually backed the project. That is a conversion rate of 34%. I actually don't know what a good conversion rate is. I think that's okay, but that just goes to show that even if your project has a ton of followers, you're not guaranteed to get a sale, which is why you want to have as many followers as possible. Now, let's talk about rewards, specifically how popular certain rewards were. Now, I had a couple different rewards and I kept it pretty simple since it was my first campaign. I had 4 backers that backed me without a reward, meaning they gave me money, but they didn't ask for anything in return. I had 22 people back the early ebook. I had 26 people back the special edition paperback. I had 13 people back the deluxe hardcover. and I had 18 people back the annotated deluxe hardcover. The paperback was the most popular, and I should also note, for anyone who got the paperback, the deluxe hardcover, or the annotated deluxe hardcover, they also got the ebook as well. And it's important to note the popularity of how certain rewards went, because that definitely impacted what I will do going forward for future Kickstarters. But again, we'll discuss that later. There's a whole section of the video just for what I would do differently. Now, let's discuss funding. So everyone tells you when you launch your Kickstarter, the very beginning of the campaign and the very end of the campaign are going to be when you get your most backers. And that was very clear. So here's my chart on the progress for funding. You can see that the first 2 days were great. It was awesome. And to be totally honest, I was dead convinced that because the first 2 days went so well, that I think I made a goal of raising like $100 a day, because I was like, oh, this is going great. $100 a day should be very easy. That didn't happen. There were actually many days where there was zero progress. Every now and then I would get someone canceling their pledge. That would break my heart. But the saggy middle of Kickstarters is very evident, and I also think slightly inevitable. There's definitely stuff you can do to prevent that, but it's very tough to keep the momentum going throughout an entire campaign. But then the end of the campaign comes and you have something that you can say to your audience to be like, it's your last chance, grab the Kickstarter while you can. And because of that, it ends up making things a lot more exciting and you get a lot more backers. So you'll look at my chart and you'll notice the last 3 to 4 days is when things really kicked up again and I got a lot of last minute people backing. Now, the way I pulled this off is I ended up having a stretch goal for character art, and I really pushed on social media saying, I want to get this stretch goal. I want to unlock character art. Please support the campaign to unlock the character art. And I think that's one of the big reasons why there's such a big spike up towards the end. But I also think that's inevitable with basically any Kickstarter that you do. And I also want to note the average pledge amount was $49.33. And that is because basically you had my cheaper tier, which was the special edition paperback that a lot of people got. But then you had my more expensive tier, which was the annotated deluxe hardcover. And that average price is basically the average price of those two tiers, which makes sense. Now, let's discuss survey results, because when you complete a Kickstarter, you can send all your backers a survey, and the survey is how you get everyone's shipping information. You can also collect other information. I ended up asking people in my survey particular questions to help me figure out whether or not having a Kickstarter was worth it, and if they would have maybe bought the book regardless, or if they heard of me through Kickstarter before. So the first question I asked in my survey is, why did they support the Kickstarter? Basically, I narrowed it down to, did they support the Kickstarter because they liked the book? Did they support it because they like me? Or did they support it because it's a cool, fancy special edition? 10% of people said they got the book because it was a special or deluxe edition. 42.5% of people said they got it because of the story or the genre or the fact that it was a no-spice romance. And 47.5% of people got it because they were a fan of me or read my books in the past and really liked them. The next question I asked was, how did they hear about the Kickstarter? Because I know a lot of you want to know, do you need to have a platform before you run a Kickstarter and have it be successful? 6.8% of people said they heard of me through a Kickstarter swap. Now, this is when you team up with someone else who's running a Kickstarter and you say, in my next backer update, I'll mention your Kickstarter project if you mention my Kickstarter project, and you do a swap in terms of that. I did this a lot early on, and then I kind of abandoned it more and more as the Kickstarter went on, because I just found that for me, as someone who writes romance that doesn't have any spice or any fantasy, it was really hard to find comp titles of other Kickstarters that were similar. And I know the rule of thumb for Kickstarter is that you can swap with anyone and it doesn't really matter. But to me, I felt like an author who wrote fantasy romance with a ton of spice, the odds are that those readers are the same readers that would read my types of book are not zero, but not very high. So I didn't invest a lot of time into it. So I do wonder if I had spent more time doing that, if I would have had better results. But moving on, 17.5% of people said they heard of the Kickstarter just by browsing on Kickstarter, which is actually really cool to hear that they were just on the Kickstarter page and found the book. 18.4% said they found out about it through Instagram. Now, the issue here is that I did not say whether it was my Instagram account or someone else's Instagram account. So it's wishy-washy whether or not they were a fan of me before or not, but through Instagram, so it was worth putting some time into Instagram. 4.9% of people heard of the Kickstarter through word of mouth. So that's a little bit of a mystery, but good to know. 21.4% of people said they heard of it through my newsletter, which is always awesome to hear. And 31.1% of people said they heard about it through my YouTube channel, which does not surprise me at all. That is my biggest platform, my main platform. That's kind of what I aim to do. Looking at both the charts that we've discussed and comparing kind of what decisions were based off of me / my platform and my books, and what decisions were based off of having never heard of me before, I think it's very obvious that it is definitely helpful to have a platform before you start a Kickstarter. Now, with that said, I don't think it's impossible to do a Kickstarter without a large platform, but it is certainly helpful. I think the existing platform that you have will directly result in how much money you raise in your Kickstarter, though. If you're an author with an extremely small platform, do not expect to raise thousands of dollars. I think that's just a matter of fact. I think Kickstarter is great to reach new readers, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all. So with that said, do I think you can use a Kickstarter to reach a new fan base? I think the answer is yes. You can absolutely reach new readers. I can tell you at least 25 people who supported my Kickstarter had never heard of me or my books before and had just discovered me through Kickstarter. And that's just me basing that off of survey results. That's like a rough estimate, so who knows? But I think basically you want to take your existing platform and then use Kickstarter for your existing platform, but then to also expand your platform as well. Now, one of the questions that you guys were asking me, especially in the video where I talked about how much profit I made, was whether or not I took into account the extra time that goes into just creating the Kickstarter page, marketing the Kickstarter, fulfilling the Kickstarter. And when you take that time into account, is it still worth it money-wise? And I would say no, absolutely not. At least not for my campaign. I definitely think there's other campaigns where the bigger your audience is, the more money you'll raise, the more profit you'll make, and then yes, it will absolutely be worth your time. But I also think odds are if you have like a mid-sized platform and it's your first Kickstarter, it's probably like time-wise, you'll never make your money back because Kickstarters are so time intensive. And if you don't like time intensive things, don't do it. But personally, this was more like an experiment to me, and I always knew that my first Kickstarter, there was going to be some hiccups, and that meant that I would take whatever I learned with the first Kickstarter and use it for future Kickstarters if I choose to do future Kickstarters. Because frankly, it takes time for things to build, and the platform I had during Kickstarter won't be the same size as the platform I have for future Kickstarters. Hopefully my platform is much larger. But I also enjoyed the process of making the Kickstarter and maybe not marketing the Kickstarter. I didn't really enjoy that, but I really enjoyed fulfilling the Kickstarter orders. That was really fun to me. So for me, it was worth it, but if you don't enjoy any aspects of those things, then don't do a Kickstarter. Now, could I have made just as much money without doing a Kickstarter? So let's say I still did the special and deluxe editions of my book, but instead of hosting it on Kickstarter, I just sold it as signed books on my website, like what I'm doing right now, where I have the special editions and the deluxe hardcovers available for sale. I don't think I would have raised nearly as much. And the reason why is because Kickstarter is like a very specific thing. And the audience that's already on Kickstarter are already primed to buy high ticket items. Like, Kickstarter is not for basic signed books. Kickstarter is for those really fancy editions. And it's also a very specific way that things are presented. It's very visual. It's a timed thing with a deadline. So you know that Kickstarter is only for X amount of days, so you'll be buying it. Now, that is why as I sell these leftover paperback special editions and these deluxe hardcovers, I know they aren't going to sell probably as well as they did during the Kickstarter, because it's not a thing on a timeline anymore, and it doesn't have a deadline, and it's just until they sell out. And my audience that shops off of my website aren't necessarily pre-primed to buy things. It's there whenever you want it. It doesn't have the same excitement as a Kickstarter. Now, you can try to create your own Kickstarter looking page on your website, but that's going to be way more time intensive than using the Kickstarter platform, because the Kickstarter platform is already pre-built to deal with all these time intensive graphic heavy pages. Whereas if you try to build it from scratch on your own website, it's going to be a lot more work. So to me, I feel like it's worth it to do it through Kickstarter, but I definitely know of some other authors that have kind of hosted it on their own website and still had success. It's just a lot more work. And I feel like just doing it on Kickstarter is a lot of work. So then you add more work on top of that, and it's just overwhelming. Now, the next question I have people asking is whether or not I think I'll get follow-up sales. And the answer to that is, dear God, I hope so. That's kind of part of why I'm doing this, is not so they just read the one book, but so that they'll also go on to read other books. Now, Sparks in Iceland is actually a part of a standalone series, so it is a standalone book, but it is also technically part of the Flying in Love series. And the way the Flying in Love series works is that each book is a different couple flying to a different location. They fall in love at that location. Book 1 is Friends to Lovers set in Iceland. Book 2 is Billionaire Romance set in Italy, which I'm currently writing right now. My hope is that if they read Sparks in Iceland and like it, they'll either read the next book in the series when it comes out, or look at my backlog of books, aka the Road Trip Snapshot series, and read those books as well. Now, that is something that is nearly impossible to track, unfortunately. You can kind of slightly track it by if you notice an increase in sales after a Kickstarter, but there's no particular way to know for sure if someone is reading the other books that you've written because of the Kickstarter. And the last question you guys have been asking me is, will I do a Kickstarter again? And I had to think long and hard about it, but the answer is yes. I think doing a Kickstarter is so fun, and it truly just gives me an excuse to make these super special deluxe editions of my books that I wouldn't create otherwise. And as an author, I really enjoy owning the copies, and if I can create deluxe editions of my books without having to spend an arm and a leg, then it's all worth it to me. So even though I didn't make a ton of profit off of Sparks in Iceland, I hope that that profit only increases the more Kickstarters that I do. And speaking of which, I actually have the pre-launch page live for my next book on Kickstarter right now. So you can go ahead and follow that project. It'll be linked down below. For now, it is called Project Italy, because like I said, this is going to be the second book in the Flying in Love series. And it is, again, a billionaire romance set in Italy. It is a closed-door romance as well. And it is also still considered a standalone book. So even if you don't read Sparks in Iceland, you can still read this next book without needing the backstory. Now, what makes it a series is that the books are slightly interconnected in that the main character of this second book is Cassie, and we met Cassie as a side character in Sparks in Iceland. And now when you read Sparks in Iceland and you see the name Cassie, you'll kind of be like, oh, okay, I know who she is, or at least who she's going to be. So please follow the project on Kickstarter. I'll be sharing updates as I have them. Now let's go into the last section of this video where we discuss what I would do differently, because I've been making a long list of all the things that I would do differently. I'm actually very proud of what I did do, especially for it being my first Kickstarter and kind of sort of not really knowing what I was doing. Like, I had done a ton of research, but nothing really prepares you to run a Kickstarter. You learn a lot on the spot. Let's just put it that way. So the first thing I would do differently, which I'm already doing differently, is that I would do a longer pre-launch period, which is why I already have the pre-launch page ready for Project Italy right now, because you can follow it and I can start building it now. Because truthfully, it probably won't come out for like at least another year. We'll see. I haven't really put a big deadline on it yet. But that is the first thing that I would do differently. I wish I had done a longer pre-launch period, because you need that time to build as many followers as possible. Because like I said, they recommend that you have 100 followers to your pre-launch page before you even launch your Kickstarter. I didn't even have 100 followers by the time my Kickstarter ended, which is kind of an issue. But imagine if I had 100 pre-launch followers, how much more successful the Kickstarter would have been. I could say to myself that maybe it would have been twice as successful, since I had basically half the amount of followers. I also wish I revealed the book cover sooner. Now, book cover reveals are a very important thing in the self-publishing world, but when it comes to revealing your cover for a Kickstarter, you want that cover on there during the pre-launch period. So honestly, I think as soon as I have my book cover finished this time around, I'll probably show it off, so I'll have that much more time to really grow my pre-launch page as possible. So another reason to follow the Kickstarter now is that hopefully the sooner we get the most followers as possible, the sooner I will reveal the cover, because I'll feel more inclined to get it done faster. Because I didn't reveal the cover for Sparks in Iceland until it was a month before the launch of the Kickstarter, which meant I basically really only had a pre-launch page for the Kickstarter for a month, because I was like, what's the point of having a pre-launch page if I don't have the cover to show off? So I didn't really talk about it a whole lot on social media. And then the closer the date came to the Kickstarter going live, the more I realized how much that was a mistake. Another thing I would definitely do differently is that I would offer less editions. And mainly I came to this conclusion by looking at the popularity of the rewards, because it made it like confusing. We had the early ebook, which I always want to offer. We had the special edition paperback, which I really like having because it's a budget-friendly option. And then we had the deluxe hardcover and then the annotated deluxe hardcover. And that's where I feel like I messed up. I had two options of printing the book that were both basically the same book, but one had annotations and one didn't. And because this is my first time offering this, I didn't know if everyone would like annotations, so I wanted to give people the option to get the book without annotations. But I think in the future, rather than offering a book with or without annotations, if I am going to have a deluxe hardcover and I want it to have annotations, that means that will be the only version of the book that is offered. So in the future, I would do it where we have the early ebook, the special edition paperback, and the annotated deluxe hardcover. I would get rid of that middle tier, also because, as we saw on the chart earlier, it was one of the more unpopular tiers. And that makes my life harder because that book is printed through Book Vault, and every time you print a different book through Book Vault, you have to pay a fee. So I had to pay a fee for the deluxe hardcover, and then I had to pay a fee for the annotated deluxe hardcover, and the annotated deluxe hardcover was way more popular. It was also a little more expensive to print, but I was just like, oh, I should have only done the annotated deluxe hardcover. Another thing I wish I would have done pertains to newsletter swaps. About halfway through my campaign, I started to panic because I found doing the Kickstarter swaps was kind of working, but not working a lot. And after doing more research, I decided that newsletter swaps would be more beneficial to me because I could reach out to other authors in my genre and do newsletter swaps with them, even if they didn't have a Kickstarter. So I kid you not, I was reaching out to other authors in my genre and in my circle and saying, hey, I have this book that's on Kickstarter. Can you feature my Kickstarter in your next newsletter? And I'll feature one of your books in my newsletter. And that meant that they could do anything. They could feature a new release. They could feature a book that was on sale. They could feature a newsletter opt-in book. And it gave them more options. So even if they weren't doing a Kickstarter, we could do a swap that way. And that worked out great. But the issue was I didn't start doing that until I was halfway through my campaign. So a lot of authors I reached out to were like, oh, I already have things planned for my newsletter, or I already sent out my one newsletter that I send out for this month. And so like they wanted to help, but because I didn't pre-plan, they couldn't help. So I wish I had planned things ahead of time rather than last minute in a panic. And with that said, I also wish I had done newsletter swaps during the pre-launch period, because some of the authors that I reached out to were like, oh, I am going to have a book on Kickstarter, but not until a couple months from now. So can you share the pre-launch page of my Kickstarter, and I'll share your actual Kickstarter that's currently running. And that worked out great because obviously both of our audiences were then primed for Kickstarters, and it was awesome, but they were smart enough to do newsletter swaps for their books during their Kickstarter's pre-launch phase, whereas I didn't do that at all, and I wish I had. I also wish I had tapped into the closed door romance community a lot more on Instagram. I feel like in the past couple years, I really struggled with social media. The older I get, the more private I want my life to be. And it's really hard to stay present on social media when you also want to stay private. And I'm just really struggling still to this day to figure out how to cultivate an audience on there without feeling like I am running my own personal creative well dry. That's what it feels like to post on social media every day sometimes. So my plan currently is I've been doing a ton of research into what type of posts would do really well for my books on Instagram, and creating those posts and content in a way that doesn't feel draining to me, in the way that feels really fun. Because I think when it feels fun to you as the creator, they can, readers can sense that and they follow you. If you're posting for the sake of posting, people can tell, and it's boring content and they don't care about it. And I feel like that's kind of what I've been doing, is that I have been posting for the sake of posting, but I want to post because I want to post. And so I feel like I need to do more work to cultivate my reader community and also to tap into the closed door romance community, because it's actually quite a big community on Instagram. I'm just still figuring it out. Another thing that I wish I would have done differently was really keep in mind revenue when it came to stretch goals. So this is the part where things get a little more embarrassing on my side of things, because I'm going to share with you a behind the scenes look at what I had in mind. Because one of the first YouTube videos I did where I talked about my Kickstarter was how I planned to fund $15,000 using my Kickstarter to create audiobooks for Sparks in Iceland. Obviously, I did not raise $15,000. We did not create an audiobook for Sparks in Iceland. And that's okay. I'll be honest, I kind of didn't think we were going to reach that number. And I wasn't totally mentally prepared to create an audiobook for the book, but I totally would have if we had reached that number. But because of that, I had taken all my stretch goals and kind of made certain milestones that I needed to meet monetarily to be able to space it out till we met the $15,000 for the audiobook. And that meant that we were only supposed to unlock a stretch goal every $2,000. And that's what I had in mind behind the scenes. But anyone who's ever hosted a Kickstarter will tell you, you do not share those numbers ahead of time because you kind of have to launch your Kickstarter, see how it goes, and make new monetary goals based off of how your Kickstarter looks like it's going. And basically, my Kickstarter launched and it didn't flop, but it did not go nearly as successfully as I had kind of hoped it would. So I had to very quickly refigure out the stretch goal situation. Basically, I ended up making my stretch goal monetary goals much, much smaller. And it ended up being that we would unlock a new stretch goal every couple $100 rather than every $2,000, which meant that the original goal that I had for character art was that we wouldn't unlock it until we hit 10 grand. And instead, we unlocked character art at 4 grand, which is still a great number. However, let's take into account that I paid $350 for my character art. And when I'm paying $350 for my character art, and it was originally character art that we were supposed to unlock at 10 grand, that meant we cut a lot into our profit. And that kind of happened a couple times because I also added in an additional stretch goal to print an extra postcard when I didn't originally plan on printing 2 postcards. So that was also extra money I had to split and ate into the profit. So I wish I had been more mindful of that when I was panicking, being like, oh my God, we're not going to unlock any stretch goals because I set my stretch goals too high, so I need to set the bar much lower. And I totally forgot about the fact that if I set the bar lower, it'll eat into profits and it'll make it less logical. So with that said, I also wish I had done more free stretch goals. A lot of the stretch goals I did do were free. Like one of them was printing a map that I designed in the book, and another one was printing a playlist that I made in the book. So those are all free things. I would much rather have stretch goals that require more of my time rather than stretch goals that require a monetary number. Another thing I would have done differently is that I wish I had had large rewards. I very quickly realized that that was a mistake because now I've seen Kickstarters where they offer a large reward where it's over $200. And you would think oh, no one will back that for $200. But some people do. And honestly, that is a great boost to your Kickstarter. I think my largest reward costs $85 plus shipping, which honestly is tiny. And I also didn't do any add-ons where people would have their rewards, but then they'd also have add-ons, where I did have one add-on that was a paperback of my novella. But I didn't have add-ons of other editions of the book of the Kickstarter. So say you wanted the annotated deluxe hardcover. So you got the tier for the annotated deluxe hardcover. But you maybe also wanted the special edition paperback. I offered no way for people to get both. And I should have offered that because if you look at other Kickstarters, that's what other authors offer on their Kickstarters is you can get the individual book that you want specifically, or you can get all the editions of the books and have all of them. And not a lot of people get them, but some people do. And that's a huge moneymaker because then you have a larger tier. And I had no large tiers. I just felt that my annotated deluxe hardcover was the large tier, but it was still priced under $100. So comparatively speaking to other Kickstarters, it was actually a small tier or a mid-sized tier. And the last thing I would have done differently was that I would have asked a slightly different question in my Kickstarter survey because I wish I had asked, did you know of me and my books before this Kickstarter? Because that would have been very clear data I could have given you guys. Instead, I asked, how did you hear of this Kickstarter? And what made you back this Kickstarter? Which is along the same lines, but a clear question of, did you know I existed before this Kickstarter ran is a clear yes or no answer. And I didn't ask it, and I kind of wish I did because that would have been fun data to share with you guys. Anyways, that's everything I would do differently. I feel like I've blabbed a lot in this video, but I feel like I've also shared all the knowledge that I've learned thus far, and I hope you guys can learn a lot from me. I know I've learned a lot, and I'll be doing a lot differently going forward for my next Kickstarter. I am proud of everything I did do. I feel like most of what I did do was good. I just need to do more, which is always the issue, isn't it? Anyways, please go ahead and follow my pre-launch page for my next Kickstarter. It would mean a ton to me to have your support, so when we launch the next one, it'll be hugely successful, hopefully. And I think something to keep in mind if you go ahead and have your own Kickstarter is that your first Kickstarter, it won't go as perfectly as you want it to, and that's okay. We're all learning. I do think Kickstarter is a platform that you kind of have to try out and figure out on your own. It is its own little rabbit hole that you go down, but I think it is a great tool that can make you a lot of profit, especially once you know what you're doing. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to comment down below, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next week.